Draw breath.
So yeah, good to meet you. I'm Dylan Barker, one of the encounter leads for Mainline WoW. And then my companion here, Noah, can introduce himself.
Yep, I'm Noah Smith. I'm a quest designer on Team 2, and I'm feature owner for Prey. Nice to meet both of you.
And nice to meet you guys as well. And
great to meet you guys.
Thank you so much for being here. We're very grateful for this opportunity and for your time. But yeah, just to kick things off today, Pika, is there anything you wanted to sort of ask them to start things and to get things going?
Yeah, sure. It's great to meet you both, Dylan and Noah. I just a quick icebreaker question is, what's something that you're most proud of, or the best thing that you worked on in the War Within? A quick question answer.
Dylan, after you.
So weirdly, I was on Overwatch during War Within, so
wow.
I probably have to wildcard it. I came back right as the expansion dropped, so I'm gonna say N'Zoth, and I'll just flex a little bit.
Okay,
Very
go
nice.
ahead. No.
For the War Within, I did a lot of work on the Ringing Deeps. That zone came together. There were so many challenges that we kind of, met, putting that zone as just an underground cave zone going into that expansion. So many expectations with the new Earthen race and the machine speaker stuff. Very passionate about all that. So yeah, super proud of how Ringing Deeps turned out in the War Within.
No wonder we always have to pass through there no matter what dungeon we want to fly to. You're always making us go through the Ringing Deeps. It makes sense.
Always a flyover zone in every expansion.
Have to showcase it. Awesome. Okay, yeah, and then just for the audience following along, just a quick brief overview of what today we'll have. We're going to be doing raid encounter design questions, sort of dungeon design encounter questions, and then we're going to dig deep into the prey system as well. So starting off first, we're going to start with raid encounter design. And the first question's a bit of a long one, so just kind of hang with me for a sec. So in the Metaforge Omega raid, several key bosses, especially during the Race to World First, so Forge Weaver, Araz, Nexus King, and Dimensius, they were significantly nerfed after the Race to World First, but prior to these changes, they were pretty comp restricted in terms of what was required and what was needed to combat the mechanics in order to kill the boss for the first time. Moving forward, is this going to be the norm for future raids where Race to World First guilds are required to have more specific comps and then they're nerfed after to sort of make the general population have an easier time? Or what are you guys kind of expecting there going forward?
I think even in a world where mechanics did not demand World First Raiders to organize themselves on a certain comp, they're going to do that because they're going to find the absolute lightest, fastest vehicle they can use to kill a boss. Right. It's awesome that that's the case. I wouldn't say it's something that is a requirement that we do or do not do this. I think a lot of maybe what you're encapsulating there is opportunities for individual classes or specs to do the thing they do. And it's cool, we want some of that in every raid. I think it being walked back a little bit when, let's say very good or very great raiders get in there, but not the absolute best in the world, it kind of makes sense on a case-by-case basis.
Awesome. And then the next question would be, weak auras, macros for private auras, and add-ons have basically carried Mythic progression. Take a look at Mythic Fractalis, for instance. With some of the boss mod tools, planning to go away in Midnight, how will encounter design adapt to maintain that challenge? Will fights lean more on built in-game tools and obvious solutions, or should players expect to rely more on personnel skill and awareness? Basically, get good.
Personal skill and awareness is something that I think we want to have players display across whatever level they're playing at. As far as how we're changing individual mechanics or even broad philosophy, there's a lot of things that we will now get to do because we will have, let's say, a more level playing field. There are puzzles we would make where if I put a puzzle in the game, I cannot make the fight harder by making the puzzle harder. I have to shoot at your feet. I have to really up the time stress. There are aspects of that puzzle that if I tuned the puzzle to make you do one more step of a complicated puzzle, it just doesn't matter. Weak auras would have just solved it for you as fast as before. When I look at an example like Fractalus, I get into some of the thoughts that I've seen folks express publicly about this fight might actually have been more interesting without it. So that's kind of an attitude I've been taking, and we'll work through that as we get some stuff in y'all's hands.
You do feel that like some fights like Mythic Archimon back then, I think that's something everyone looked at was like, I don't know how I would ever do this fight without weak auras, right? Like you would have to have the brain of a supercomputer on every single raider. Like is that something that we'll see again, like moving forward when you remove those kind of like weak auras or outside add-ons?
I think when we test, and we're testing without add-ons internally, we want to make sure it feels like really good WoW playing humans can do this. As far as things where it's like you actually need like second precise decision making that cannot be done by mortals, yeah, that's probably something we'd avoid doing, and that's a good constraint for us, I think, as designers.
Oh, wonderful. All right, but also on that note, something that's kind of been brought up all the time after again, is like visual clarity of boss mechanics on like for like more noticeable sounds, icons, and colors and encounters. Other than like fight immersion and styles, fights always seem to have like the same color palette. It's like a purple circle in a purple room in a purple raid with purple transmog. It's like very difficult sometimes for accessibility in terms of boss mechanics and like people being able to see them properly. I know in my raid specifically, sometimes people claim, oh, I died to this mechanic because I'm colorblind. I can't see purple, right? Whether they can or not, they're just telling people that. But, like, how do you guys plan to combat that in Midnight?
I think we're going to have to just up our game. I think when I'm talking with folks on the team about fights that are still in development behind closed doors, there is an expectation that we should help players understand that they are about to do the mechanic correctly, that they are doing it correctly. They should understand why they died from more of our own effort and what we expect of them from more of our own effort. We have a lot of tools at our disposal. It turns out a lot of the stuff that folks have had for add-ons for years have sort of made it so that those tools are less important. We have to just bring them back to the front.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I definitely think you're starting to see that in modern dungeon design, especially. Like mechanics are very indicative of what they want you to do and how you should react with them and stuff like that. That's awesome. Last question here on raid design before we move on. So with Evoker being introduced a little bit ago now as a mid-range spec and Devourer Demon Hunter coming into Midnight as another mid-range spec, how does the encounter design team approach mechanics to support this 25-yard mid-range class? Are bosses designed with it in mind? Like, for example, Lumathar from this tier had a safe zone, right? You had to get out, there's a big circle, and the safe zone was about 26, 27 yards, but the mid-range specs are 25 yards. So is this something you keep in mind, or do you prefer encounters to sort of naturally have like 3 positional zones, ranged, mid-range, and then range?
It was frustratingly close to range. I understand. Yeah. I think in general, we don't look at, we need to provide this exact range breakpoint. There are opportunities for us to say, I know somebody on the team plays this, and they're going to notice that I thought of them in this very specific way. But when you take an entire raid as a slate of bosses to fight, you're going to find some that are very meticulously, oh yeah, I made this decision for this one thing. I hope they notice. And then some other things where this is just generally good WoW, and it turns out like Evokers are very good. You should bring them, right? And people just figure that out.
Yeah, I find that like on a lot of different boss fights, even like raids, where the Evokers are always saying, "You're out of my range. You're out of my range." You think of like a fight like Demencius, where they're on like 2 different sides of the platform, or even the Rookery, like last season, where the final boss you have players spread all across, and if you're a Preservation Evoker, you're just not getting invited because you just can't reach.
Yep.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you so much for talking about the raid. let's talk a little bit more about Mythic Plus encounters specifically. It's something where me and Kes kind of like focus a lot of our extra time in. So I would love to like learn way more about what is coming in Midnight. So, for example, like what are some of the lessons you guys learned from past dungeon encounters that didn't quite land very well with players, and how does that influence your future encounter design?
Oh man, this in some ways makes me want to throw some of my old work under the bus, my own personal work. I think I would say the density of complicated and lethal abilities on Trash is stuff that we are actively wrestling with and trying to make sure when we go into Midnight feels better. Things that kill you should look like they're going to kill you. I think I'm probably double dipping with a question that you might also ask about, like frontals being involved with Trash. And I sort of think about, we use a design term a lot called affordance, and the affordance of a creature. When I put a dragon in front of you, I would expect a dragon might breathe in a frontal. Dragons are big, or drakes are big. They are shaped in such a way artistically as to convey, I might do this. Versus, a Night Elf Archer could potentially do this, but the rules have to get a little bit more stringent. So when I look at stuff from the past, it's mostly like overloaded Trash. I don't know if that makes you start thinking about what dungeons I might have been talking about, but things where, you go into a poll and it's like, well, there are 4 things here that are going to get me, and they're all a little bit scary.
Does like, if you look at the numbers from, like, let's take Ecodome, for instance, right? There's that big bug that goes underground that probably 99% of the population avoids, because anytime you pull it by accident or intentionally, people wonder, why am I even still here? Like, does that make it so, like, you take that numbers into consideration for future dungeons? Like, we're never going to make a mob like this, or like Bubbles, for instance, in Floodgate, where you guys removed him completely, where you're never going to make a mob like that in the future again, or you try to twist it and make it so that it's like easier or not as punishing?
It's a learning experience. I mean, Bubbles is a great example, right? Like, that mob was made with a lot of love and care and attention, and it was a problem. And the designer, when asked to remove it, got rid of it in a really funny way. I think avoidance as a mob is an interesting idea. And there are situations where that's not as good. I think in organized high-end Mythic Plus, it's pretty cool to have this thing where it's like, oh, that's scary. I do genuinely not want to touch that. Is kind of cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, especially when I think the opportunity to skip the big scary mob doesn't necessarily involve like some crazy invis skip or night elf skip or something like that, like Bubbles did, compared to the big bug. When creating encounters for Mythic Plus, like, how do you guys ensure that different roles in class toolkits sort of have opportunity to shine without making certain specs feel mandatory over others? Like, an example of this would be like, doing a Priory of the Sacred Flame, second boss with a Death Knight who can AMS soak all the soaks, and then doing it without a Death Knight where, now all of a sudden you need 5 people to soak, multiple people to soak with defensives and stuff like that. So how do you guys kind of balance that?
I think some of that is just understanding that up until a certain point of key progression, we see a pretty healthy range of strategies and players. And so, I would presume that y'all are representing a higher skill level, and I can't speak for like every player in that group, but at some point there is just a skill or a strategy that works really well, and it sorts out into a meta. I think that's broadly healthy. I will say we're pretty careful about the only way to do this is by having this thing. So if you were in a mid-tier Mythic and it were just like, oh, this is impossible without this specific class, that would feel wrong. But once you start getting into 14s, 15s plus, it's like, okay, the math here is not on your side, and you really do need to build every advantage in that you have.
Yeah, for sure. So, like, on that same note, do you guys kind of look at the strength of like raid buffs in like 5-mans versus like raids? Because I know raids, you just kind of expect everybody to have like every kind of raid buff because there's so much player like opportunity there because there's 28 spots, or even more, I think 30 in like a heroic or normal. But like in like something like Mythic Plus, like people find it Like, not just in the high end, even in the low end, they feel like, oh, with like Sky Fury Totem, we get so much more, or Sky Fury buff rather, we get so much more damage, or Mark of the Wild, Arcane Intellect. Like, it's like almost causes a little bit of an imbalance. Do you guys take that into consideration at all when doing dungeon design?
When we're building the content, not so much. I think I would want to defer to somebody with like genuine class experience as far as what those serve and how that feels to them and to y'all. I mean, I think generally it doesn't affect the content a whole lot. We are tuning with that stuff in the environment as we're building. So
awesome. And then this season, I think we found a lot of encounters, or even in raid, damage amp phases, right? Like, that's like been a pretty popular theme, whether it's like on Dimensius, Forge Weaver Araz, or even like a lot of the different dungeons in the War Within. How do you guys feel about fights that have these large damage amp phases, and how it affects like player power, right? Because you have something like an arcane mage as a surge, and you just see their damage meter just fly with like an incredible amount of damage, versus other class maybe like Fury Warrior, like a little bit of me, who we have like more of that consistent damage pace. And like, do you guys try to do a little bit of everything as you get through like a whole like tier or season of dungeons, or does that even like take into consideration?
It's a simplification. The damage amps are cool because people like big damage. It just kind of makes sense. But the flip side of that is true too. We have some classes that are very rampy and need some dedicated time to build up, at which point they really do start taking over. I like that feel too. And it's, to me, just about, are we providing enough variety with our encounters? I usually think we do a pretty good job of that, but then there are just some situations where it's like, yep, my arcane mage is just going to smoke this and they're going to feel great. So,
like, do you have like a whiteboard? It's like, oh, we need to make sure we have one damage amp boss, one regular boss, like one with a lot of adds, one with that's pure single target.
Yeah, that's a cool question, because I don't know that damage amp is necessarily a core part of that, but we definitely do at some point develop a matrix of like, what kinds of challenges are we providing? Target profile is a big one. I think it would be a really big miss for us to not have something that engages different target profiles throughout a raid or a dungeon season. I mean, even when we're discussing dungeons, it's just like routing. What kind of routing options are we giving you? We want to give new challenges for routing, or we want to make sure that we're not just doing strictly linear. We want people to be able to have some sections in dungeons that are a little less linear, maybe forked. So yeah, there are situations where, as we're planning, we have, a matrix up of like, are we serving all of the right notes here?
Awesome.
Oh, that's a great insight. Next question. So I believe, to our understanding, there was a blue post or an interview or something a little bit ago that said something along the lines of Ecodome, the new dungeon we had this season, was a sort of like design test for you guys, in the sense of like, the dungeon is quite simple mechanically and very indicative of what the dungeon is expecting of you in terms of how to deal with the mechanics. There's very clear arrows, circles, stuff like that. So it's very straightforward. You don't need to like overly analyze the mobs to understand what's going on. Was this design test a success for you guys? And is this something we can expect to see more in not only the new dungeons coming in Midnight, but also the reworked ones we're getting in the dungeon pool?
I would say it's got a good kernel at the center of it for Ecodome. Something I said earlier about us making sure that we've got more explanation for what our mechanics are doing, using the tools that we as designers have, is really key for Midnight. I think Ecodome kind of started some of that as we were having those developed thoughts for Midnight. I think you should expect in general for us to do a little bit more work on the visuals end, on our own sort of as designers work, to show you what it is that's going to kill you and why.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, like I said as well, it's quite obvious in the two dungeons that we got to play as well that that's sort of the path we're heading down. Not sure how much can be answered on this. A little bit of an add-on question, but once the game shifts towards less add-ons and more in-game functionality, how do you expect players to navigate surviving like higher keys, higher content in groups that aren't necessarily using communication? So for example, like if we weren't able to track the cooldowns of our teammates defensively, but I believe from today's information we can see when they're active. So how do you sort of change the design or expect the design of dungeons to go with less things being trackable just from looking at the game?
Yeah. I can say one thing, having spoken with some of the other leads today about interrupts and them becoming as single target interrupts a little bit more impactful as far as duration of lockdown. I think that's going to be a minor help. I think it just depends on the level at which you're playing. At the high end, I think most folks are going to be in some kind of voice communication, and I think, as with many other games, the ability to communicate in real time about what you have available in the game state is going to be a cool skill to develop for a lot of folks. We're also often looking for ways to express that non-verbally. I think, the ping system does quite a bit already. I think I would not be looking to like radically alter game design direction because of it. But of course, we'll be sitting and listening to how folks are feeling with the tools that we have provided, and hopefully taking notes for future tools we can provide.
Awesome.
So just to add on to that quickly, is there any sort of plan to eliminate and or show like, oh, I can't track his bark skin, I can't track this button, but I can see when he presses it or I can see when he has it?
That is not a detail I am certain of. So I
Gotcha.
suspect there are other folks you could ask that might give you better info.
Awesome. So yeah, we probably talk a little bit more about the prey system now. I think Noah's been itching to talk about his like little baby there. So Kes, what's your first question about the prey system?
Yeah, so is the intention of the prey mechanic meant to be in the open world still where other players are visible? How will it work with flying and with war mode? So if I'm flying, can I get hunted while I'm flying? If I'm in war mode, can I get attacked by my huntress and a random player in the world?
Yeah, I think implicit in that question is like, when will I be getting ambushed?
Yeah,
and I can definitely tell you right now that we're limiting ambushes to combat specifically. To answer the first part of your question, so while flying, you should be fine. Really, the name of the game with Prey is to maintain the fidelity of the outdoor world. So we didn't want to disable flying or do anything to make that normal loop feel, any different than it normally does. In regards to war mode, yeah, you can do it. All gloves are off. We look forward to putting some fun stuff in there. We're not indexing too hard into it as a specific PvP feature, but we're definitely not saying you can't do it, and there might be a couple of fun achievements to rack up along the way.
That's exciting.
Get them, third party them. Get them while they're busy.
Right?
That's the point.
Tale as old as time, right?
Of course. Yeah. So is the prey system meant to be like infinitely repeatable? Like, can I spend my entire day nonstop doing the prey system, and was it like rewardable, like in terms of like gear and stuff, or is it just like achievement based after that point?
Sure. So I can answer that kind of through a couple different avenues. We didn't want to mandate that you have to do prey. There's an inherent amount of friction saying, hey, this game mode is about getting ganked. Some people are like, nah, that's not for me. And like, we totally respect that. And we have designed prey in the outdoor space to be like, if you are on a nightmare mode prey target and your buddy is not in the feature standing right next to you, they're not going to get hit by anything. They can jump in and they can help, but we're leveraging a lot of, for example, the kind of conditional crab tech that we used in The War Within. And we're saying like, you can see what your friends are fighting if you're on different targets, and you can jump in and help out. But we are very sensitive to the overall fidelity of the outdoor experience, because Prey is ultimately a feature that is about putting the outdoor world at the center. I can also offer a little bit more in the way where Prey is fully multiplayer friendly up to a 5-stack if you want to, up through every difficulty. What we're changing based on the difficulties is where that final encounter is located in terms of phasing in the open world to maintain a level of difficulty along the lines of what Dylan has been talking about. We want to have a little bit more control. So for example, on normal mode, when your guy spawns for the final time, anyone around can see him and just jump in and help. On hard mode and nightmare mode, you are you and your friends in your group are dealing with that in a much more controlled and much more challenging space.
I'm so excited about this. That's awesome. So on that note, there are still some limitations in terms of like cross-faction queuing for things and stuff like that. Can you cross-faction you in a 5-man stack for Prey?
So I can't give any specific answer here, other than our direction for Prey is to basically say, however you can normally group in the outdoor world at midnight is what we will be taking forward. So we're not imposing any specific restrictions on anything. If you can group up with friends and do world quests and kill rares together, you should be able to do it while doing Prey.
Sounds like
Awesome.
an awesome system. Yeah, I can't wait to hunt my friends,
Excited.
you know, if they're doing the prey system, and just, you know, hover above somebody until they're getting ganked, and then just swoop in for that easy kill, you know.
I just want to see Pika in war mode.
Oh my god. Okay, anyways, thank you guys so much again for your time, both Dylan and Noah.
Thank
We
you guys
appreciate
so
it
much.
so much. Me and Kess are both so excited to have spent this time with you guys talking all about everything Midnight. I can't wait to jump into the alpha and experience everything you guys have been working so hard on. Okay, I don't know, Kess, do you have any last thoughts?
Just again, thank you guys so much. This incredible opportunity. Absolutely love the answers you gave. And I said this yesterday when I was playing Alpha, but I have never been more excited for an expansion after playing for one day. I am so excited. And as someone who loves open world content as well, I honestly cannot wait to do the Nightmare price system as well. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.